Today I'd like to talk about the book of Deuteronomy, continue our journey in chapter 31 as we conclude chapter 31 and then journey into chapter 32. In chapter 31, the Lord is telling Joshua that he would lead the people now to the land that God had promised to the people. But the most important thing in his talking to Joshua is that he says, the Lord will be with you. You can just imagine Joshua at this point taking on this tremendous responsibility from Moses. I mean, Moses had led the people from Egypt. He had been with the people in the desert. The people had rebelled. He had tried to keep them together. All this back and forth with the people, and it was crazy. So now Moses, 120 years old, he's facing death. And God says, well, now Joshua is going to be the one. You can imagine Joshua saying, well, wait a minute now. Moses had been leading the people. Now, can I do this? But the important thing is God says, you will not be doing this alone. I will be with you. Moses then wrote down the law, and he gave it to the Levites who carried the Ark of the Covenant. So the Levites had this particular duty. Not only would they help with the offering of the sacrifices, but they were in charge of the Ark of the Covenant and in charge of all of the altar and all of the tents that were involved with the altar. And the law will become a witness for the people. And it's a witness for the people in the sense that if they are going to be faithful to the law and follow the law, they will be affirming the covenant. They will be saying yes to God. But on the other hand, if they stray from the law and forget about the law and just do what they want to do and say, forget the law, no, then it will be a witness that they have been unfaithful to God and unfaithful to the covenant. So the law becomes the witness. The people disobeyed the law when Moses was alive and leading them. So in Deuteronomy it says, well, they disobeyed the law when Moses was actually there and he was leading the people. Just think, how much more now will they disobey the law now that Moses is dead? When you think about it, it makes sense. Moses was sort of like, well, he's there, we'll try to follow it for his sake, even though they didn't do such a good job when he was there. But now that he's dead, could it be even worse? Moses says he is sure that the people will be corrupt. Moses says it's going to happen. The people will become corrupt. He's convinced of it. Evil will befall the people because they have turned away from God. And you can just imagine when this was written down. So at the time of the historical events, of course, Moses is leading the people. But by the time this gets written down many years later, think of all of the evil things that the people have gone through because they have turned away from God. And of course, the most terrible evil of all was the exile and the destruction of Jerusalem. So the people were aware of all of these events, and so when Moses says this, he's like predicting the future, but the people know, yes, this is exactly what happened. As we journey into chapter 32, we have a very famous passage. It's called the Song of Moses. And it's a beautiful song that Moses sings to the people. And the importance of the song is that this is something that the people could sing and that they could remember. So the song becomes very important as a memory aid for the people. And the song really, in the beginning, celebrates the faithfulness of God. And it's interesting that God is referenced as a rock during the song 8 times. God as a rock. And also God as a father. And reference to God as a father is rare in the Hebrew Scriptures. We see it in verse 6 of chapter 32. We also see it in Psalm 103, verse 13, and in Proverbs 3:12. But very unusual to reference God as a father. Of course, we're used to the Christian scriptures, we're used to the prayer, the Our Father, used to speaking of God in terms of a father, but this is something that is unusual in the Hebrew Scriptures. God's children have treated God basely. They have not treated God well. God provided food for the people. But what did the people do? The people turned towards other gods. A beautiful line. You forgot the God who gave you birth. Imagine that. Imagine forgetting somebody who gave you birth. We think about it and say, well, that's impossible. How could I forget someone who gave me birth? How could I forget my mother who gave me birth? Even those who are adopted are always searching for the birth mother. The birth mother is the one who carried me for 9 months, who gave birth to me. And God is the birth mother. God gave birth to the people. God initiated the covenant with Abraham. God ratified the covenant with Moses. God was present in helping the people and in guiding them. So in every sense, God gave birth to the people. So how can you as a people forget this God who gave you birth, who brought you to life, who established a covenant with you? God says in the song, I will hide my face from them. When they turn away from me, when they worship other gods, the punishment is I will hide my face from them. They will not be able to see my face. God will send on them woe on top of woe, all these bad things in the psalm list, all these terrible things. And as you read the song and as you hear the song echoing, you're like, oh, these things are really bad. God will repay their foes, though, those that have attacked them. God will repay. God is still going to protect the people, even though they have turned away from them. The law is the very means of your life. If you follow the law, you will have a long life in the land. So again, this theme of the importance of following the law, and that leads to long life. The Lord told Moses to go up on Mount Nebo so that he could view the land of Canaan. He will then die in the mountain and be taken to his people, just as Aaron was. He died on Mount Hor. So this parallel between Aaron, the brothers dying, but when they die, they will be brought and they will be buried. Both Aaron and Moses broke faith with God at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin when they failed to manifest the sanctity of God. So God at that point wanted to forgive the people, and Moses and Aaron were reluctant with that. They felt the people had turned away from God and that they should be punished. God, though, had a different plan. God was more merciful. God was more forgiving even than the leaders, more forgiving than Moses and Aaron, who tried to intervene with God, but God went above and beyond even what Moses and Aaron wanted to do in terms of the forgiveness of God. And so as a result of that, Moses will not be allowed to enter the promised land. And as we conclude Deuteronomy next time, we'll see what happens to Moses.